The static on the phone line hums a dead frequency, mirroring the silence in my chest. Outside, the Los Angeles sun bleeds through the blinds, painting stripes across the cold tile floor of his home office. This room, usually sterile and orderly, is slightly off today. A file sits on the edge of his massive mahogany desk, a folder not tucked neatly away, its contents spilling just enough for a name, an address, a number to snag my eye. It's a name I know. Not well, but enough. Enough to recognize the chill that just started crawling up my spine isn't from the aggressive air conditioning. The document is a closing statement. Not for a business deal, not for the tech company he's built or the investments he jugs. This is different. It's personal. An escrow account, a wire transfer, a staggering sum. $9 million. Destination, a ranch property way out in the obscure corners of the county, miles from anywhere civilized. And the recipient. The beneficiary name attached to this vast, sprawling piece of land. It's hers. Sarah Jenkins. The woman he swore was just a colleague, a necessary evil, on the periphery of his business world. The woman I'd had that gut feeling about for months, the one he dismissed with practiced ease, with the same confident authority he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. $9 million for Sarah Jenkins. A ranch. Not a discreet apartment, not a hidden city condo. A ranch. A sprawling, undeniable, permanent piece of earth. The paper feels heavy in my hands, heavier than lead. It feels like the weight of every lie he ever told, condensed into a single, damning file. The sunlight stripes across it seem to highlight the figures, mocking me. 9 million. For her. The world outside the window keeps moving, oblivious. A car horn beeps distantly. A bird chirps. Inside this room, my world just shattered, silently, without a sound. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. My life before that file. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was comfortable, predictable, built on a foundation I believed was solid stone, mortared with shared history and mutual respect. We met young, climbed the ladder together, or rather, he climbed it while I stood steady below, holding the net, cheering him on. I managed the home, the social calendar, the quiet bedrock of our shared existence while he conquered markets and boardrooms.
It was a partnership.
Or so I thought. He was charming, driven. A man who knew what he wanted and usually got it. I admired that. I built my own quiet life around it. Garden clubs, charity work, evenings spent discussing his day, offering a listening ear he seemed to genuinely value. Our home was beautiful, a testament to his success, filled with art we chose together, furniture we picked out on weekends. It felt like ours. We had routines. Coffee on the patio Sunday mornings. Dinners where he'd recount some victory or setback. Holidays with family. The texture of our life was soft, familiar, worn in like a favorite sweater. There was a quiet contentment. No grand romance, perhaps. Not the breathless kind you read about, but a deep, abiding sense of security. He was my anchor, I was his harbor. We talked about the future, vague plans for retirement, maybe traveling, maybe finding a quiet place away from the city eventually. The idea of a ranch had even come up once, years ago, a fleeting, romantic notion dismissed as impractical. My desires were simple. Continuation. Stability. A comfortable, shared journey into old age with the man I'd built my life with. I didn't need the flash, the constant upward trajectory he craved. I found joy in the steady rhythm, the subtle beauty of a life well tended. I thought he did too, in his own way. He always came home. He always shared his coffee with me on Sundays. These small things, the rituals, they felt like proof. Proof of us. Proof that the external chaos of his high-stakes world didn't touch the core of what we had. That core felt inviolable. It felt like love, settled and deep. The file. Finding it wasn't planned. He was traveling, a last-minute trip. He called, asked me to find a specific contract he'd forgotten on his desk. It was under a stack. This folder wasn't the contract, but it was right there, slightly out of place. A tiny disruption in his otherwise meticulous order. My fingers brushed against it, curiosity piqued by the unusual name I vaguely recognized from hushed phone calls he'd taken, stepping out of the room. I shouldn't have looked. But the universe, in its cruel indifference, places temptation right where you're weakest. And my weakness, it turned out, was the quiet anxiety about that name I'd felt stirring, a subtle discord in the symphony of my calm life. Opening the folder felt like stepping off a cliff. The closing statement, the address, the 9 million,
And her name.
it hit me not like a thunderclap, but like a deep, silent implosion. The air rushed out of the room, out of my lungs. My ears started ringing, a high, thin sound that drowned out the distant city noise. I stood there, holding the paper, staring at the numbers, the names, the cold, hard proof of a betrayal so profound, so casual, that it didn't even feel real. $9 million. Not a hidden account, not a string of expensive gifts. An entire ranch. A future built with her, in secret, using the resources of the life he shared with me. The scale of it was what broke me initially. Not just the infidelity, which was a brutal enough wound, but the investment. This wasn't a fling, a mistake he might regret. This was a deliberate, long-term commitment of staggering proportions, an alternate life purchased and planned without a single word to me. It spoke of a depth of deception I hadn't conceived of. It wasn't just a secret affair. It was a secret life, a secret future he was building with someone else. And he was using our life, our resources, the fruits of my steady support, to fund it. The unfairness of it was a physical blow. Nausea churned in my stomach. My hands started shaking, making the damning paper rustle. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to shatter the serene facade of this office, this house, this life he had so carelessly defiled. But I didn't. A strange, cold quiet settled over me instead. A numbness that felt protective. I carefully placed the paper back in the folder, pushed the folder back into its spot on the desk. My fingers memorized the texture of the paper, the specific corner where the ranch name was printed. My mind was racing, but my body moved slowly, deliberately. The act of putting the file back, restoring the room to its misleading order, felt significant. It was the first conscious decision I made in this new, shattered reality. He wouldn't know I knew. Not yet. The early struggles were silent. Internal. The hardest part was the performance. Slipping back into the role of the unaware wife. Greeting him at the airport, smiling, asking about his trip. Listening to him talk about business in vague terms, knowing exactly what kind of business he'd been conducting. Every casual touch, every shared meal, every night we spent in the same house felt like a performance of the absurd. He would talk about the future, our future, and I would nod, a knot tightening in my stomach. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. He was planning his real future with her, on their $9 million ranch, while discussing a fake future with me. I couldn't eat. The sight of food made me nauseous. Sleep was a battlefield. When I closed my eyes, I saw the closing statement, the numbers, her name. I saw the ranch. I'd looked it up online, found pictures, the vast, empty land, the luxury home he was building. It was beautiful. It was a monument to his betrayal. I imagined them there, together, building a life on the ruins of mine. The thought was a physical pain, a sharp, twisting agony in my chest. I cried in the shower, letting the water wash away the tears before he could see. I cried into my pillow, muffling the sounds of my grief. I walked through my beautiful home, the home I had loved, and felt like a ghost haunting a stranger's house. The silence between us became a living thing, a heavy blanket woven from his lies and my unspoken knowledge. He seemed lighter, happier, even distracted. He would take calls and step away, his voice low. He would spend hours on his laptop after dinner, his brow furrowed in concentration, and I knew he wasn't working on company financials. He was planning their escape, their new life. And the more normal he acted, the more my own internal world became a storm. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't even trying to hide it well anymore. Or maybe he was just so confident in my ignorance, in my predictable role, that he didn't think he needed to. That thought was the most cutting of all. He underestimated me. He saw me as a fixture, a piece of furniture in the life he was preparing to abandon. The days blurred into a painful rhythm. Wake up, put on the mask, endure the performance, research in secret, cry when alone, repeat. My research started simply more details on the ranch, looking up property records, zoning maps. I needed to understand what he was buying. What kind of future he envisioned for himself and Sarah Jenkins on $9 million worth of land. Was it just a private retreat? Was he planning some kind of development? Was there more to this than just a love nest? The pain was a constant companion, a dull ache that flared into sharp agony whenever he smiled at me, whenever he touched my hand, whenever he spoke of our future. Humiliation was a bitter pill I swallowed daily. How could I have been so blind? How could I have built my entire adult life with a man who was capable of such calculated deceit? The anger simmered beneath the surface, a molten core threatening to erupt. But I held it in. Eruption felt like weakness. Eruption felt like giving him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. And I was broken, yes, but something hard was forming in the cracks. Something cold and sharp. One night, staring at the zoning map for the county where the ranch was located, an idea began to form. It wasn't a warm idea. It wasn't about healing or forgiveness. It was about consequence. About making the monument to his betrayal crumble. The ranch was the symbol, the tangible proof of his double life. What would happen if that symbol became worthless? What if the $9 million dream turned into a $9 million nightmare? This wasn't about getting the money back. It wasn't about finding proof to use in a divorce court, although that was happening in the background, quietly, through a lawyer he didn't know I had contacted. This was about striking at the heart of his betrayal in a way that would resonate with him. His currency wasn't love, it was control, success, building empires. The ranch was his latest conquest, his gift to his new empress. I needed to make that conquest meaningless. To turn his victory into a colossal, humiliating failure. The zoning map sparked the thought.
Zoning.
Regulations. The intricate, often maddening rules that dictated what you could and couldn't do with a piece of land. A $9 million ranch wasn't just bought to look pretty. He had plans. Development, maybe? A luxury retreat? Subdividing? Whatever it was, it would depend on zoning. And zoning was controlled by the county zoning board. That was the midpoint shift. The moment the idea crystallized, the shift from victim to something else entirely. Something colder. More calculating. I stopped seeing the ranch as a symbol of his love for her and started seeing it as an asset. An asset he had foolishly made vulnerable. And I started seeing the zoning board not as a bureaucratic obstacle but as a lever. A lever I could potentially control. The thought was audacious, terrifying, and strangely exhilarating. It required a completely different kind of thinking, a move away from the emotional devastation and into the strategic, the financial, the amoral? Perhaps. But morality seemed a luxury I could no longer afford. He hadn't played by the rules of love and loyalty. Why should I adhere to the rules of conventional warfare? The research intensified. This wasn't just looking up property lines anymore. This was delving into local government, campaign finance laws, political contributions. Who was on the county zoning board? What were their interests? Who influenced them?
Who funded them?
It was a tangled web, far removed from my garden clubs and charity galas. It was the messy, opaque world of local politics and favor trading. It felt grubby. It felt necessary. I learned the names of the board members, their voting records, their professional lives, their personal lives to the extent they were public. I found out who the major players were in the county, the big landowners, the developers, the environmental groups. And I found out how the system worked, how donations were made, how influence was wielded. It wasn't about outright bribes. That was too risky, too crude. It was about support. Campaign contributions. Funding local initiatives. Building relationships. It was about making it more beneficial for the board members to see things my way than any other way. Rising challenges mounted quickly. I had money, yes, from the life I'd built alongside him, from my own careful investments over the years. But $9 million for a ranch? His resources were vast.
Could I compete?
Could I buy enough influence to counteract whatever forces he might already have in play, or could easily mobilize? I needed to act quickly, before he made his own moves public, before his plans for the ranch became widely known and gained momentum. Secrecy was paramount. If he caught even a whiff of what I was doing, he could easily use his power to shut me down, bury me in legal challenges. Operating in secret was a constant strain. Making coded phone calls from burner phones. Meeting with lawyers who specialized in unconventional strategies. Consulting with political operatives who understood the local landscape. Every conversation felt dangerous, every transaction fraught with risk. I had to liquidate assets quietly, move money around without raising red flags. I felt like a spy in my own life. The mask I wore for him had to be flawless. I continued to be the supportive wife, the calm presence, while internally, I was orchestrating a quiet financial and political coup. There were moments of doubt, waves of fear that threatened to drown me. What was I doing? Was this worth it? The cost wasn't just financial, it was emotional, psychological. I was navigating a world that felt alien and hostile. People I spoke to were cagey, transactional. There was no warmth, no genuine connection, just quid pro quo. It was a mirror of the world he inhabited, the world he had pulled me into with his deceit. Had I become him? Was this revenge twisting me into the very thing I despised? The deepening crisis felt like a tightening net. Reports came back about initial soundings. The board members were established, some with long ties to local developers who might be aligned with someone like my husband. The scale of influence needed was significant. It wasn't just about writing checks. It was about navigating complex relationships, understanding intricate power dynamics built over decades. My resources, while substantial, weren't infinite, and I was up against a man who could leverage his immense corporate wealth and connections. All seemed lost when one key contact warned me off, citing the major players already involved in the area, hinting that crossing them would be unwise. It felt like a direct warning, perhaps even from someone connected to him, who sensed unusual interest in the area.
Doubt gnawed at me.
Maybe I should just take the divorce settlement, lick my wounds, and walk away. But the thought of him and Sarah Jenkins building their life on that $9 million ranch, a constant, tangible symbol of his betrayal, was unbearable. Walking away felt like admitting defeat, like letting him win completely. It felt like allowing the narrative to be that he simply moved on to something better, leaving the old model behind. I couldn't stomach that. The turning point came during a sleepless night, staring at the ceiling. I pictured the ranch again, saw the aerial photographs, the pristine land, the potential he saw there. And then I pictured the county planning office, the dry, dusty room where decisions were made, where lines on a map dictated destiny. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic, like a courtroom showdown or a confrontation. It was bureaucratic, technical, unseen. And that was its power. He was focused on the land, the physical asset, the grand gesture. He probably saw zoning as a formality, something his team would handle. He wasn't paying attention to the subtle levers of power at the local level. That was my opportunity, his blind spot. He thought big, national, international. He didn't think small, local, granular.
He bought the ranch.
I would buy the rules that governed it. The decision solidified within me, cold and hard. There was no turning back. I liquidated more assets. I widened my network, reaching out to intermediaries, lawyers, consultants who specialized in this specific, murky corner of the world. I wasn't just making donations anymore. I was orchestrating a comprehensive campaign of influence. Funding local campaigns, supporting community projects the board members cared about, commissioning independent studies that highlighted specific environmental concerns about development in that particular area, concerns that just happened to align with outdated zoning regulations that could be upheld. It was expensive. It was complex. It was emotionally draining. But with each step, the feeling of power grew. It wasn't the loud, aggressive power he wielded. It was quiet, insidious, woven into the fabric of local governance. It was the power to say no in 1,000 different, legitimate-sounding ways. The power to make a $9 million investment sit idle, appreciating only in raw land value, while development, his likely goal, became legally impossible. Months passed. He was oblivious. He was spending more time away, presumably at the ranch, overseeing construction, planning their future. His mood was buoyant. He talked about diversification and new ventures with a sparkle in his eye. It took everything in me to smile, to nod, to not betray the hurricane I was building beneath his feet. The secrecy was a cage, but also a shield. He couldn't defend against an enemy he didn't know existed. The day of the zoning board meeting arrived.
It was a Tuesday.
A dull, unremarkable Tuesday in a county building miles away from my city life. I didn't need to be there. My lawyers and representatives were handling the technical aspects. But I needed to see it. I needed to be present, a silent observer at the culmination of months of clandestine work. I drove out alone, the landscape changing from urban sprawl to rolling hills, closer and closer to where his dream, built on my pain, was located. The county building was drab. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish. The meeting room was small, utilitarian. Hard plastic chairs. A long table at the front where the board members sat, looking tired and bored. There were a few other people present, local residents, maybe a developer's representative. I sat at the back, a nondescript woman in a simple dress, observing. He wasn't there. Of course not. A man like him wouldn't attend a local zoning meeting. He'd send his people. The meeting droned on. Petitions were heard, variances debated, mundane decisions made about fences and setbacks. My heart was pounding, a drumbeat against my ribs, completely out of sync with the dull proceedings. My item was near the end of the agenda. A request for a zoning change on a large parcel of land, the ranch, from agricultural to mixed-use development. His team presented. They talked about jobs, investment, community benefits. They had charts, projections, glossy brochures. It was persuasive, professional. They seemed confident. Why wouldn't they be? This was a done deal, surely. A $9 million investment, backed by a powerful figure. Then came the questions. From the board members.
Questions that were
surprisingly pointed. They focused on environmental impact, on water usage in an area prone to drought, on traffic patterns on small rural roads. They referenced studies my money had funded. They cited concerns raised by local citizens and environmental groups my influence had mobilized and amplified. The questions were calm, technical, utterly devoid of drama. But beneath the dry language, the resistance was clear. The board members weren't rubber-stamping this. They were scrutinizing, delaying, raising objections. The representative from his company, smooth and polished moments before, started to look flustered. He stumbled over answers, promised further studies, offered concessions. But the board members were relentless, guided by the quiet work my proxies had done, armed with the information my money had bought. Then came the vote. One by one, they stated their decision. Against, opposed, cannot support at this time, the votes were unanimous. The request for the zoning change was denied.
permanently.
The agricultural zoning would stand. No development. No mixed use. No luxury retreat requiring significant infrastructure. Just a ranch. A very expensive ranch, miles from anywhere, restricted to agricultural use. The room remained quiet. A few people shuffled papers. The next item on the agenda was called. It was anticlimactic, but the impact was like a silent explosion. $9 million tied up in land that could not be used for its intended purpose. A monument to betrayal rendered inert. A symbol of a future with her, legally throttled. I walked out of the building feeling
hollow.
not triumphant, not joyful.
Just
Finished. The cold satisfaction I had anticipated was mixed with a profound weariness. The price of victory was high. I had spent a fortune. I had lived a lie for months. I had walked through the mud of political influence and financial manipulation. I had won. But what had I won? A very expensive, legally restricted piece of land wouldn't heal the betrayal. It wouldn't give me back the years I had invested, the trust that had been shattered. I heard about his collapse the next day. Not from him, of course. From a mutual acquaintance, careful with their words. He'd been in his office when he got the news. The zoning decision. His people must have delivered the blow gently, technically. But he understood. He understood what it meant. The loss wasn't just $9 million. It was the humiliation, the failure, the loss of control. For a man whose identity was built on success and getting what he wanted, it was devastating. He collapsed. Physically. A heart scare. Stress. The acquaintance was vague on details, but the picture was clear. The blow had landed. I didn't visit him. I didn't send flowers. I simply existed, quietly in the aftermath. The house felt different now. Quieter, perhaps. The weight of the secrets lifted, replaced by a vast, echoing emptiness. The ranch sits there, I imagine. A beautiful, useless piece of land. Sarah Jenkins? I don't know what happened to her. I don't care. Their future, built on my foundation, crumbled the moment the zoning board cast their votes. He survived. He recovered. But something fundamental had shifted. He looked older, smaller. The arrogance was tempered by a new caution, a new understanding that the world wasn't entirely within his control. The divorce was expedited. Quietly. He didn't fight it. He didn't mention the ranch. He didn't mention the zoning board. We divided the assets, severed the ties, two strangers dismantling a shared history. The $9 million ranch? It's still there. Still zoned agricultural. A silent testament in the rolling hills to a battle fought not with shouts or tears, but with paperwork and political capital.
I didn't take the land.
It held no value for me. It was a tainted victory symbol. Its value was in its uselessness to him. I learned that you can lose everything you thought you had and find a strength you never knew existed in the ruins. I learned that some battles are won not by fighting on your opponent's terms, but by changing the rules of the game entirely. I learned that power can be quiet, strategic, and wielded from the shadows. The victory feels cold, not warm. It didn't bring happiness, but it brought a grim sense of justice. A balance restored, not by fate or karma, but by deliberate, calculated action. My life isn't the same. The predictability is gone. The simple desires feel naive in retrospect. But the ground beneath my feet, unsteady for so long, feels solid now. Not because I'm back where I started, but because I rebuilt it myself with a harder, colder stone. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.